Elon Musk is one of the most controversial businessmen in the world right now, but what's often not discussed is his triple citizenship. Today, we're going to break down his passport portfolio, what you can learn from it to benefit yourself, and how I would make it better. Elon Musk has 3 different passports: South Africa, Canada, and the United States. We're going to break down how he got each of those, the pros and cons of holding each, the takeaways of how you can benefit, and I'm going to tell you how I would make this passport portfolio better and what I think the problems are of it. A lot of people with this kind of profile, Western entrepreneur, have perhaps dual or even triple citizenship, but they're not really truly diversified, so we're going to cover that. So, Elon Musk, South African citizen by birth. Now, South Africa is not a country that grants citizenship purely by being born there, which means if you are a South African, and we have a handful of South African clients over the years, it might be worth finding a country where you can go and give your child a second passport just by being born there, for example. So you can take the flight across the ocean from Joburg or Cape Town over to Brazil, for example, and in Brazil, your child will be a Brazilian citizen merely by being born there. Most countries in the Americas offer that. And so if your child is already getting citizenship by you being their parent, it's good to offer an alternative. And so Elon Musk is not South African because he was born in South Africa, but rather because his father is South African. And so that's how we got that passport at birth. Later, when he was, I think, a teenager, he would go on to claim citizenship by descent in Canada. His mother had been born there. Canada is a country that offers citizenship by birth. And so her mere birth in Canada made her a Canadian citizen. Different countries have different rules on how to pass that lineage down and how far back you can go and if one person's born there. But bottom line is he was able to claim that, and that's what allowed him to move to Canada and study there, and that's what made his entry into the United States easier. We'll cover that in a minute. And then he eventually became a U.S. citizen by naturalization, which is how Steve Bannon can claim he should be deported and denaturalized because he was not a natural-born citizen, and therefore, if you can find anything that he ever did wrong in obtaining citizenship, you could theoretically take it away. So those are the 3 passports: South Africa, Canada, and the United States. Let's go through the pros and cons of each of those. South Africa pros are: it's part of BRICS. It's part of the Global South. That's that area that I think is increasingly interesting. I think will become increasingly prosperous. If you look at the global share of the economy, BRICS has a bigger share than the U.S. and its allies in the West. South Africa, part of the African Union. You're seeing growing Pan-African movements around the continent. You're seeing in West Africa, for example, a lot of countries getting rid of the French and their influence. And you are seeing in a pivot towards the East. If you're in business, that's not the worst thing to have. And so possible priority access to not only things in South Africa, but across Africa. I've been saying that I think there's a slow movement to open up access across the African Union. So if you're a South African citizen, you may have priority in other African countries at some point in the future. That could be interesting for business as Africa ascends. The cons of South Africa, more philosophically in Elon's case, are that when you leave the country, they have one of the more aggressive tax systems, certainly in Africa, but really anywhere in the world, for people who exit the tax system. Now, Elon left when he was a kid, didn't really have any money then, not a big deal. Do I think South Africa is going to impose a global tax on its citizens? I think it's a lot harder to pull off. I think they probably won't try and do that. I don't like the philosophical leaning of how hard they make it to leave. But I think that's probably not much of a con for someone like Elon Musk, especially given that he's paying taxes, or at least liable as a tax resident somewhere else. So to me, not a big loss there. Canada, to me, the pro is it's one of the more neutral Western countries. That allowed him to go to the United States easily because Canada and the United States have special immigration pathways for each other. And so by becoming Canadian, again, he could study there by right without having to go and get a student visa. And then that allowed him an easier path into the United States. Now, the downsides in Canada are a lot of people there don't like him. They got hundreds of thousands of signatures to kick him out of the country or to basically take away his citizenship, which isn't really possible. So that's not really too much of a con other than a frustration. There have been murmurs, I've been telling you for years, about possible citizenship-based taxation in Canada. I would think they would do it before South Africa does it. If nothing else, Canada can look to their neighbor to the south and say, hey, that's a system that in some way could work for us. You've had guys like Jagmeet Singh talking about potentially taxing citizens. Now, if you're also American, I'm not sure that makes your situation worse because you're already subject to it living in and being a citizen of the U.S., but it's a risk just as the passport on its own. The U.S., the benefit to me, the biggest benefit of being a U.S. citizen is you can work in the United States. Anyone can set up a business in the United States. Anyone can do a lot of things in the United States, but the biggest thing is you can work. And in the case of Elon Musk, you can also get access to government contracts, and that's where he made a lot of his money, is getting special deals, of course, with SpaceX and some of the defense stuff. That's something that only American citizens can do. The cons are, there's people who don't like him in the United States as well. You saw somewhat muted, but nevertheless a push in the first Trump administration to denaturalize certain people, where they would go through naturalization files, even decades old, and say, oh, this person lied. Listen, if you were naturalized in a country by fraud, you could easily lose your citizenship. You shouldn't do that. Same thing when we help our clients get citizenship by investment, for example. If you hide something from them and they find out later, you're going to be gone. I'm not saying Elon Musk did that, but obviously it's a risk that you have this very toxic political climate right now where guys like Steve Bannon are encouraging that. Of course, the big problem with the U.S. passport is it has citizenship-based taxation. No matter where he would ever want to live in the world, the United States is going to tax him. And so in his unique case, he's able to make all this money, borrow against his Tesla shares, borrow against other shares. He's paid huge amounts of tax, but the politicians get on him for not paying tax the way everybody else does. I would argue the bigger issue is the global stigma. Him being in politics is a bigger issue, but American companies are less well received around the world. Look at Tesla's and how the sales numbers are in the tank in China. Now they're in the tank in Europe. That's partially because of him. I think there's a growing push against people who are citizens of and running businesses in the United States. And so that issue may not apply to you. I mean, if you're not running a global empire with your face on it, that may not be a concern. However, you also don't get his tax advantages, and you're probably not getting his government contracts. And so the people who point to Elon Musk and say, well, he's a U.S. citizen, you think Nomad Capitalist, he's not worth $300 billion. What does he know? Right. Elon Musk has a very specific profile. Peter Thiel with his, multi-billion-dollar Roth IRA, not only probably going to be impossible to replicate as politicians go to make that harder, but just, such a minute possibility that would ever happen in the first place. And so what you're seeing is the most visible people who you can point to and say, wow, that's the pro of becoming a U.S. citizen. It doesn't apply to the average person. And so, I see business shifting away from the United States. And I think being a citizen there on top of this, on the citizenship-based tax, is going to carry a stigma. So Elon Musk, bottom line, is a passport portfolio that to me is not that diversified. We'll come back to that in a second. My takeaways, if you can get citizenship by descent, you should get it. We help clients get citizenship by descent. You can go to nomadcapitalist.com/CBD. This is citizenship through your ancestry, and it can include you had a parent who was born somewhere in a country that grants citizenship by birth on the soil. We've had clients where they never realized their parent being born in Mexico made that parent a Mexican citizen and therefore entitled them to Mexican citizenship as a backup plan. Mexican passport's pretty good. Whatever you think is happening today, hey, my investments in Mexico have been doing pretty well recently. Peso's been doing better than people expected. That's not a bad passport to have. So go through your parents, go through your grandparents, and do it now because Italy just made it harder to go too far back not that long ago. You want to get the citizenship by descent in whatever country when you can. Parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, in some cases even further back, but you're seeing some countries make it more difficult. That's takeaway number one. Takeaway number two is if you have a passport portfolio and one gets squirrely on you, you could always renounce it. And so my thoughts on South Africa are that could be the easiest one to renounce if they decided to, let's say, impose a global tax. Again, that global tax may not impact him, but what it could do is make his affairs more difficult living in the United States where the systems start to conflict. Sometimes that's what happens when Americans move overseas, even though they're qualifying for the foreign earned income exclusion and they're deferring a lot of their tax after guilty. They still have tax systems where they live that conflict with the U.S. and make it difficult. So if South Africa did that, he could always renounce that passport. The benefit of having a passport portfolio is you get to decide who serves you today. The kind of standard mantra is, well, the United States built Elon Musk, he should owe us homage. No. Elon Musk built Elon Musk. Sure. Did he get some money from the government? Hey, why doesn't everyone get money from the government and become worth $300 billion, if that's the argument? So we're flipping the mantra on its head that somehow you owe allegiance to a country. Everybody else who went to school with or worked with or hung out with Elon Musk, they ain't worth $300 billion. So obviously he did something different. And so if you did something different and you've got a collection of playing cards that are passports and one wants to make your life difficult unfairly, off it goes. And I think South Africa could be the easiest one to get rid of. Obviously, a guy like Elon Musk, if he renounces his U.S. citizenship, that's going to be the biggest deal ever. Eduardo Saverin, who's one of the co-founders of Facebook, gave up his U.S. citizenship. They tried to pass a bill that he could never come back. Obviously, Elon Musk is too big that he can't do that anymore, which is why I would argue if you think that you may not want to stay in your country and you think your country could be a liability politically and economically in the future, do as I did and renounce before you become too big. Now, I care a lot less than I'm sure Elon Musk does about going back to the United States. And so therefore, I was happy to renounce. But I did it because I felt things were only going to get more difficult for people who wanted to do business internationally. And it was better to get out sooner than later. And I think I've been proven right. So that's my takeaway on Elon Musk. My analysis is the Africa piece is interesting, but he's got one of the worst passports in Africa. It's not the worst for travel, although you still need a visa for most countries. That's not his concern, being an American and Canadian. Sao Tome and Principe, for example, has a new citizenship by investment program. That's something that we're starting to talk to clients about. It's very affordable. That's the kind of country, if I'm in Africa, that I'd like to have. Or what I did years ago with the now defunct Comoros citizenship by investment program. I mean, I'd rather have a more benign African Union country than South Africa, where there's some geopolitical issues and then the tax issues. Canada is the best in the bunch. Because it gives him the flexibility to be in the U.S. Obviously, for him, with the government contracts and wanting to go all in on the U.S., being Canadian only and never naturalizing wouldn't have worked. My argument's going to be he lived in the United States, he was paying the taxes, better to eventually naturalize if he wants to stay there. And his business is very U.S. focused, especially as other markets are drying up. But again, if you're not dealing with billions of dollars in government subsidies, if you're not dealing with government contracts, is the U.S. passport really helping you that much? And so my analysis is U.S. and Canada, largely the same, except for those two things. That might work for him in a unique circumstance. South Africa is an interesting spice, but I'd rather have something more neutral. I'm not going to say Elon Musk should go and do a Caribbean citizenship by investment program, but I certainly think that Elon Musk could benefit from some sort of more Central or Eastern European citizenship by merit program where he were to go. We were just looking at some approvals for citizenship by merit in a European Union country. And it's expensive, but not for Elon Musk. If he were to go to invest 50 million euros somewhere, for example, building cars, there are plenty of countries that would welcome him. In fact, we just hosted Steve Wozniak at Nomad Capitalist Live. He was called by the Serbian government, and they gave him citizenship. And Elon Musk is certainly the highest profile entrepreneur these days. I'm sure he already is getting calls from countries like that. That's what I would want to add. I don't know that he needs something Western European. I mean, if the French government or something like that called him up, I'd rather have something for his politics, particularly Hungary. Why doesn't Viktor Orban give him citizenship? He has the power to do that. Or Poland. The president has the power to grant citizenship in Poland. That's the kind of passport that I would want to add. I don't think anything particularly in Asia. We've discussed he already has Africa covered. I don't know that Elon Musk is perhaps beyond having some kind of Latin American passport. I always think something like Uruguay is interesting. And I believe the president of Uruguay, or Paraguay certainly, that's another interesting one, could grant citizenship. So those kind of outliers are what to me would make his passport portfolio more interesting. Adding a Hungary or a Paraguay at his level, any kind of investment, or just coming there and his presence could help him get one of those passports. If you're an entrepreneur, you can follow that similar playbook where you showing up may not be enough, but there are countries out there, and this is something that we study how to do, not by giving someone money in a bag, but by actually going through proper channels. If you go and hire people in a country, there may be a pathway for citizenship for you. If you go and pay a certain amount of taxes, there may be a pathway for you. There's different things that different countries want. where you can be granted citizenship. That's the kind of thing that we talk to our clients about alongside traditional citizenship by investment programs, and citizenship by naturalization, which is what he got in the United States, as well as citizenship by descent, what he got in Canada. So you want to look at all your different citizenship options. That's what we help people do. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. Far too many people just go out and they see the other passport Steve Wozniak got, which was Grenada in the Caribbean. And they see a glossy advertisement for a certain Caribbean country. They just kind of go out and do it. You want to look at all your options, because if you could go and do something you were already going to do and get potentially a better passport, why would you go and make a donation in a country rather than going and claiming the best passport? Or why don't you claim both? The most important thing to me about having a passport portfolio is it should be diversified. If you can claim U.S. and Canadian and British citizenship, that's great. Take them all. But you're still diversified, and you need to add to that. That's what I think Elon Musk should do. That's what I think you should do. Build your passport portfolio with a company that has more options than any other. Just sent one of our people to South America for about a month to figure some of this stuff out. Met with some high-level people. Not too many other companies doing that and bringing you the options that we do. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. Build your passport portfolio better than Elon Musk.